Lessons in Terraforming for Beginners by Stephen Lake. Greetings, Fleet Academy Class 2547. In today's lesson, we will be going over the basics of planetary terraforming, including tips, tricks, best practices, and important things to avoid. This lecture will only provide you with a basic overview of terraforming. If you don't plan to pursue this as a career, it should be all you need. Hopefully. However, if you are, then I highly recommend that you take Introduction to Terraforming by Professor Galamike next semester. For the rest of you, this lecture is meant only to educate you on the basics of the craft and what you need to know about it, even if you won't be actively participating in it. This is because understanding the fundamentals of this occupation will play an important role in your future careers as fleet officers, especially when you have to interact with others who will be undertaking this rather interesting and fulfilling career. Now, before I go and bore the Blarians to the point that they eat themselves, allow me to begin my lecture. Terraforming, for those of you who don't know, is the art of transforming an otherwise uninhabitable planet into one that can support life. Now, what that life is, however, varies greatly depending on the species that intends to inhabit that planet. For example, those of you like myself, who come from oxygen and nitrogen-rich planets like Terranea, Plaxis, and Cerabo, would require a planet that is Class M in nature and has an ambient average temperature in the range of 50 to 90 degrees galactic standard, with a preferential median temperature of about 70 degrees. For those of you who come from gas giants, your ideal temperature range can vary from just below 0 to over 200 degrees standard, although around 100 degrees is what most sentient species from gas giants prefer, at least those that we have encountered thus far. Today, however, we will focus primarily on the terraforming of Class M planets, as they're the most common and most needed within a galaxy. To begin, the first thing you must do when conducting your initial survey of a planet is to fully understand its unique and potentially hazardous tectonic nature. The reason for this is because there's no point in terraforming a planet if it's going to tear itself apart with any degree of regularity. Keltis 5 is a great example of this. It's so geologically active that we still have yet to find the remains of the first team who went to the planet to do an initial ground survey. From the reports we received, as the team was making their initial entry into the planet's atmosphere, a powerful magma explosion erupted from the surface and completely vaporized their shuttle. So, if you're doing a survey of a planet, even if going to the surface would get you better readings, just don't. We don't want to see you die, and we really don't want to have to file the paperwork because you were stupid. Another thing to take note of is following the proper order in the seeding of any planets that you are responsible for terraforming. Once the planet is deemed ideal for terraforming, always start by checking the quality of the water. If the water, both ground, sea, and lake, are filled with toxic chemicals or deadly compounds, you will need to first purify all of it, or else give up on your efforts because, well, nothing you plant or place on the planet will live if it doesn't have ideal living conditions. This also includes the atmosphere. If you have clean water and lethal atmosphere, you've already set yourself up for failure. Those are the first two things you'll need to deal with before going any further. If you don't, or you can't, you may as well walk away and either abandon it, or let someone else handle it, rather than wasting Federation money on your foolhardy efforts. And I'm not trying to be mean. It's just that terraforming is an expensive operation, and thus it needs to be successful on the first try. Another example of having all the right things in the right place at the right time before you begin is to ensure that the planet you are surveying has any water at all. If it does not, great expense may be incurred to properly endow the planet with sufficient quantities of it. Those of you cadets who will not be terraformers as a career, take note of this because it'll be your responsibility to save the Federation a lot of money because of idiots who think they can seed a planet that is missing this key and most universally important nutrient. Another thing to consider when seeding a planet is its readiness to take on plant life. If it can't grow even the simplest plants, trees, or bacteria, then absolutely do not move forward with your terraforming. Fix the basic core environment, and then start adding plant life. And for the love of all that's good, do not put animals on the planet before plants. Animals need plants. However, plants do not need animals. Well, at least not right away. They will eventually. However, if you can't get plants to survive, animals won't do much better. Also, when planting seeds or young plants, be sure that the plants are properly adapted to the environment that you will be placing them in, or else the environment to the plants. Using the wrong kinds of plants or having the wrong kind of environment can lead to some, rather, unfortunate results. At the minimum, you will have a lot of dead or dying plants. At worst, you will have something that looks like a monster from a horror movie. For an example of this, there's a file on your tablets that I just sent you detailing one such mistake. In this case, the plant that was used was improperly chosen for one of our terraforming projects about 2 decades ago. As a result, shortly after planting, it immediately went into a runaway state. As such, we had to bombard the planet with high-yield photon torpedoes and then rebuild it from the rubble, wasting trillions of Federation credits in the process. So yes, please, for the love of all that's good, make sure that whatever you seed on the planet appropriately fits the climate, environment, and more such that events like that never happen again. If you're not sure, use an orbital biodome. If we have to glass something, we'd rather destroy one of those than an entire planet. Also, making certain that you have a proper growing environment ensures that plants don't mutate, like what happened on the aforementioned planet. Remember, torpedoes are expensive, just like failed terraforming projects. So please, spare us the budget overruns from having to redo a project or, heavens forbid, nuke it from orbit. Another thing to take note of is to always approach any new planet, no matter where or what it is, under full level 4 bio and hazmat alert, along with all required precautions. And before we go any further, allow me to state that dying of an unknown or virulent alien infestation or disease is not something that should be at the top of your career dossiers. Trust me, it'll hurt, and you will regret it for the brief amount of time that remains to you. And should you somehow survive and only suffer genetic or biological mutation, your lives will be, without question, beyond your worst possible nightmare. So please do not do it no matter what. They're still trying to unmutate the team that was sent to Ibius 5 over 20 years ago. Spoiler alert, we haven't found a cure yet, and they still remain, well, as best can be described, as humanoid chickens with tentacles. I'll leave it at that. Another thing to consider when terraforming planets is the use of particle beams. While very handy at speeding up the transformation process, they have also been known to cause bigger issues than they solve. Case in point, Isiguro 1. Yes, that Isiguro 1. If you ever wondered what happened to it, well, now you know. The short version of it is that the planet used to be very heavy in hydrocarbons. Used to be. That's also why the planet is a used-to-exist world as well. So again, I will leave it at that. Another thing to be careful of is, when seeding a planet, be certain you properly balance all predator and prey species. Too much of one or the other, and you may cause an unwanted imbalance in the local or regional animal life. A great example of how badly wrong this can go is Niges 3, where the scientists in charge of the planet's terraforming failed to stock enough predators, leading to an overpopulation of Orictologus, which allowed them to mutate under the planet's unique environment, leading to the creation of the Carniligus, a species of Orictologus that grew and became so powerful that they could easily eat an entire wolf like it were a mere marshmallow. Needless to say, some battleship cannon fire and a generous amount of recovery budget was required to resolve that issue. So again, please be aware of things such as this when participating in a terraforming project. Watching a gigantic, flesh-eating Carniligus popping wolves in its mouth, like cherries, is unsettling, to say the least. Anyhow, moving on. Another thing to be deeply and closely aware of is a planet's local magnetic and gravitational situation. Not all planets have either stable gravity, a stable magnetic field, or both. A great example of this is Piatina's 1. Its magnetic and gravitational fields are highly variable and, without any prior notice, can shift dramatically within mere moments. This can cause you to quickly go from weighing 200 pounds to just 1 pound before swinging sharply the other direction, resulting in being crushed under a sudden upsurge in gravity that increases your weight to well over 20 tons. Because of this strange, unexplained rapid shift, a number of people who were part of that mission were thrown thousands of feet in the air when the gravity shifted upwards, and then buried 20 feet under when it shifted back the other way. Some, who were fortunate enough to avoid the first fate, were immediately squished into jelly by G levels that flattened shelters and ships and destroyed everything in the immediate area. Avoiding exploring, let alone terraforming planets such as this, will save the Federation considerable amounts of money, time, and, shall we say, medical and funeral expenses, with the latter being the more likely outcome. Another important thing to understand about these types of planets, those with highly energetic or variable magnetic fields, is that they can create powerful EMP storms that will either cripple, disable, or outright destroy sensitive scientific equipment. In some cases, the magnetic fields have been known to destroy entire nervous systems or electrocute their victims without them having to step outside and be exposed to the storms themselves. And for those who were foolish enough to step outside, they often suffered from excessive exposure to unwanted electrocution. Our insurance company is still paying out on those claims, and they have made plenty sure we know that. Another word of warning: don't bring any pets with you. I know you really enjoy the company of Fido and Fluffy, but trust me when I say that it's a bad idea to bring them along. If you do, then please make sure you're very well insured. Lots of strange things happen to small animals on terraformed planets, while said bodies are in the process of stabilizing post-transformation. One example of this comes from the planet Begaus 4. A terraformer brought his cat and his little rat dog with him. After a rather unfortunate transporter accident caused by the planet's ongoing instability due to terraforming, he is now one with his animals. Literally, his tendency to bark and meow incessantly is somewhat unnerving and annoying to his coworkers. However, on an up note, he's become very good at using the litter box whenever he needs to. Well, Also, be aware of planets that already have sentient life on them, especially if those life forms are good at assimilating and incorporating other life forms and technology into themselves. Case in point, on Debesta 3 we sent in a group of drones to survey and terraform the planet, only to have them captured and assimilated by the local life forms. These life forms then self-upgraded to become cybernetic super beings that struck out into space and began conquering everything in their path. The fleet eventually took care of the issue. However, they are still not happy about that one and advise that we never, ever do that again. Ever. One incident was enough. Another thing to avoid is building colonies or terraforming worlds that are too close to supermassive stellar bodies. This is especially true of planets located near black holes. Even if they're physically, geologically, and magnetically stable, the time dilation you will suffer will easily and catastrophically hinder your project. Case in point, 900 years ago, we sent a colonial exploration team to the planet ZCX-91 in a 99X2b star cluster, at the center of which is a supermassive black hole. They still haven't landed yet. Apparently, as they entered the effect zone of the black hole, time slowed down for them so much that 900 years for us has only been a few hours for them. If things go well, we expect to hear back from them sometime in the future, either just before or slightly after the heat death of the universe. Food is another big item you need to be aware of when planning your terraforming mission. An example of why this is so important is because one of our teams, who went to a planet in the Yurti star cluster, stayed there a full month before leaving. That in itself isn't a problem. Where this became a problem is that it was an already populated planet on which we were looking to set up a forward operating base. When that was no longer needed, the investigative team packed up and left, as previously stated. But when they did, they accidentally left behind a case of coffee that was discovered by the locals and consumed. This created an insatiable addiction in the locals so powerful that they threatened to conquer the entire galaxy and wipe us out if we did not continue to supply them with more of it going forward. Forever. In the end, the fleet had to glass the entire planet in order to protect the galactic coffee supply. So that is yet another thing that the fleet has asked that we never, ever do again. Unfortunately, this is not the first time such things have happened, and will likely not be the last. This is why you must always properly survey a planet, and do so for a long time and very thoroughly at that, before ever submitting a request for permission to terraform it, because, well, it's better for everyone, and a lot cheaper as well. Now, with all of that said, I see a few of you by now are in need of fresh air as you are nearly ready to pass out in your seats. I'm not sure if that's due to your inability to breathe, due to an excessive desire to guffaw, or because of being properly and fully repulsed by all that I have detailed today. Either way, please take 15 minutes to collect yourselves and then report back here for the next part of our lecture. The end.